Thank you, President Joel. A concrete block weighs 17 pounds. It's my pleasure today to introduce Bill Gardam. Bill Gardam joined Peace River Center in July 2013 as President and CEO. Under his direction and continuous desire for improved outcomes and access to services, Peace River has expanded its scope of services and facilities to become known as a nationally accredited regional integrated behavioral health provider. Bill holds an MBA in Healthcare Administration from Wagner College in Staten Island, New York, and is a trained mediator for civil, family, juvenile court, and U.S. Postal Service EEOC matters. He is the board chair of the Florida Council for Community Mental Health, serves on the board of the Florida Council for Behavioral Health, and volunteers for the United Way of Central Florida on their health and financial well-being steering committees. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Bill Gardam.
So how do you fit a 25-minute presentation in 15 minutes? Seatbelts? Seatbelts, everyone? Seatbelts. I think 20? Okay, thank you. So, hello. What a great mental health day. You think about it, we just had Thanksgiving, we're with friends, we're with family. It's beautiful outside. We're not in Iowa, where they had 6 inches of snow yesterday, where my daughter lives. So we're having a really good time, and it is a good mental health day. You know, most of us don't give any thought to our own mental health, let alone the mental health or mental wellness of people that we know. But I bet if we went around the room, everybody knows somebody that has mental illness or has been affected by it. Whether it's postpartum depression, which is a real thing, guys, or it's anxiety and depression, bipolar disorder, all the different things that you see about, read about, and hear about on TV. Mental illness is one of the few diseases that can and does affect people from all walks of life, and all levels of income, all employment sectors, all faith denominations, and all ages. And it's also one of the few diseases that many people do not believe that they actually have. And even though it may be very clear to people around them, they still don't believe that they have it. And this is an important factor because close to 60% of individuals with mental illness that should seek treatment, including most people with severe and persistent mental illness, the bad stuff, do not seek treatment and are not known to mental health providers. Hard to help people if we don't know about them. For some people, this is due to the mental health stigma that you all are probably familiar with, lack of knowledge about available services, transportation and access to services, but for most, close to 50% actually, it's because they do not believe that they're sick. This severe lack of insight is so prevalent that it actually has a name, anosognosia. Anosognosia. It's very real, and which is seen in 50% or more of persons with schizophrenia and other severe mental illnesses. If someone truly believes that they're not sick, they wouldn't go and see somebody, like people that cough but never go see the doctor. That would be my wife. But if you don't think you have severe enough depression to go see somebody, you won't. And then it spirals out of control, and then somebody else, usually law enforcement, will bring you to get access to services. But if you've heard voices all your life, how do you know that other people don't hear those voices? And what's wrong with them that they don't hear the same voices that you do? So you have to start to be able to ask questions. We have to start to have conversations about it. So what I'd like to do is to start that conversation. Because becoming knowledgeable about the services that Peace River Center offers, and our crisis services, and our mental illness recovery programs and services, and our mental health first aid training program that teaches everyone like us on how to react and respond to somebody that might have mental illness, so we can actually get them help and link them up to services. So I'd like to start a trend here today and talk about mental health and mental illness with you. Let's start with our kids. So what's going on with kids today? Isn't it scary? You read about stuff in the newspaper, you see them in the news, you see them on TV. It feels like there are more issues, more problems, more difficulties that our kids of today are facing than kids in the past. And guess what? It's true. So let me see if I can shed some light on that without confusing you too much and without scaring you too much also. So in the mid-1990s, the Center for Disease Control discovered an exposure that dramatically increased the risk for 7 out of 10 leading causes of death in the United States. In high doses, it affects brain development, the immune system, hormonal systems, and even the very way our DNA develops. Folks who are exposed to very high doses have a 20-year difference in life expectancy. Yet doctors are very minimally trained in how to identify, assess, and diagnose and intervene in it. Now, the exposure I'm talking about is not a pesticide or a chemical. It's childhood trauma. It's also known as adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And I'm not talking about failing a test or losing a basketball game or breaking up with a girl or boyfriend, as traumatic as those events can be. I'm talking about exposure to adversity that literally affects the developing brains and bodies of children. I'm talking about physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, neglect, parental mental illness and substance dependence, incarceration, separation and divorce, domestic violence, aggressive and persistent bullying, and yes, even endlessly watching violent movies or playing violent and aggressive video games for hours and hours a day. We don't think that impacts us, but it does. Check your heart rate after you watch one of those movies. Check the heart rate of your kids after they play those video games. And while our children are exposed to all this, they're texting more and hanging out with their friends less. They are more sedentary. They're dating and socializing less. They're increasingly likely to feel lonely. They develop fearless thought patterns from daily Mortal Kombat and competition, which I refer to as the Arnold Schwarzenegger effect. He keeps getting shot, maimed, falls down dead, but you got another episode coming up, another series coming up. And they're less likely to get enough sleep, because that's what the video games do, and the virtual games draw us into their world. So we don't need to sleep, we just continue playing the game. And this is leaving our children revved up, stressed out, and primed for a meltdown. Adverse childhood experiences are incredibly common. 67% of the population has experienced at least one adverse childhood experience. Now, for a person with an ACE score of 4 or more, the risk of suicide is 12 times more likely. This is very real stuff. Research shows that even after 10 years, there are still markers present, like fossils in our genome, telling us that there was trauma and that the trauma may make this individual more susceptible to a second trauma or more difficult experiences and health problems and behavioral changes. But why? What happens? It's sort of like football and head trauma, but this is physical abuse, sexual abuse. So adversity affects developing brains. It affects the areas like the pleasure and reward center of the brain, our impulse control and executive function area that is critical for learning, and it impacts the brain's and body's stress response system that governs our fight or flight response. So let me tie it all together with a brief story. Imagine walking in the woods and you come upon a bear. Immediately what happens is your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, which sends a signal to your adrenal gland that says, release stress hormones. Adrenaline, cortisol, come forward, bring us aboard, we're gonna run or fight. And your heart begins to pound, your pupils dilate, your airways open, and you literally are ready to either fight that bear or run in any direction that you can. And that's a good thing if you're in the forest and there's a bear. Problem is, what happens when the bear comes home every night and the system is activated over and over and over again? This changes how we think and react, and it goes from being adaptive or life-saving, as we run away, to maladaptive and health damaging, and changing how all of us, but particularly how our children view and respond to life situations. Now, we've done some research on this, and thankfully this has not happened to all of our children, but we are seeing an increase in issues for children. In the past 30 years, research has told us challenging kids are challenging because they lack the skills not to be challenging. The skills they lack include crucial cognitive skills, especially in the domains of flexibility and adaptability, frustration and tolerance control, problem solving, basically all the areas that adverse childhood experiences impact. If kids had these skills, they would use them, because most kids would prefer not to be behavioral challenging. These kids don't lack motivation, they're not lazy, they lack skills. Just like kids with reading inefficiencies lack the skills required for being proficient readers, kids with social, emotional, and behavioral challenges lack the skills required for proficiently handling life's social, emotional, and behavioral challenges. And whether treated or not, these children, our children, go to school and are with other children that are also doing all the same things, and they share their stories and their experiences. And we wonder why bad things do happen. So the end result for much of this is that 50% of the individuals that we serve now, Peace River Center, used to be 40%. It's been a 10% increase in the number of kids and the percentage of kids we serve in just 5 years since I've been at Peace River Center. That's an enormous growth. 50% of individuals diagnosed with a mental disorder show their signs of the disease by the age of 14. 75% show their signs by the age of 24. So if you're 27 or above, you should be pretty good, right? Now it develops at all ages and all economic levels. The average age of onset of anxiety disorders in this country is now age 12. Substance use disorders is age 18. Depression is age 21. And suicide is now the third leading cause of death for the 15 to 24-year age group. All this information has probably created a small bit of anxiety for you, and I wouldn't blame you because it does with me, and I deal with this all the time. So let's go someplace else. As you can see, this is a very high mountain, and it's a beautiful mountain, and it's an idyllic town, though you can't see the inside of it. There's no crime, there's no jails, there's no drug problems, there's no cars or trucks, there's no problems with access to food or healthcare services. Their schools actually have bathrooms in them. There's no bankruptcies, there's no air or water pollution, and there is this beautiful, magnificent view. With a gorgeous lake, you can almost feel the warm sun and the cool, fresh breeze as we look at it. And of course, you can also tell from looking at this community that the schools and the teachers are all good, and of course, the children are all above average. There's just one small problem. Once in a while, someone falls off the top of this mountain to the bottom, and they get seriously injured or killed. So the townspeople decided to study this problem for many months and decided, of course, to bring in a consultant, somebody that lives 50 miles away from home and carries a briefcase. And they decided that the best course of action was to build a hospital to help the injured people at the bottom of the mountain. Because that's where they were when they fell down. So why try to drag them back up to the top of the mountain? We'll just treat them when they're down there. So I'd like to suggest that perhaps there's a better solution that this town could have done. Unless I turned it off. There we go. They should have built a safety net at the top of the mountain to stop people and to catch people as they're falling off the side of the mountain. Safety nets are a critical part of every community. At Peace River Center, working with our many partners and supporters throughout the Central Florida area, is a vital part of the safety net every day for protecting and saving children, adolescents, adults, and yes, seniors. There is help, there is hope, and there are answers that are available, and that is what a safety net does in a community. Our county commission, the United Way of Central Florida, the Give Well Community Foundation, the Sheriff's Department, and many, many other organizations have invested time, energy, and funds to make sure safety net services are in place and addressing the needs of this community. So we have grown a little bit. I know you can very clearly read all of that text that's up there. But basically what it is saying is that we offer over 30 different programs in 23 locations across Polk County. 19 of those locations are in Lakeland. At all levels of care for people in crisis or living with a mental illness, victims of domestic violence or sexual assault, and substance use disorders. We operate a psychiatric crisis hotline, a rape hotline, domestic violence hotline, and we operate the only mobile crisis response team that's available 24/7, 365. And it includes phone and walk-in and mobile crisis assessment team staffed with 20 people that respond to over 7,000 calls for help every single year. We work 24 hours a day, so we were working Thanksgiving Day and we had 15 calls out for people that were having a mental health crisis. We go with law enforcement, we go without law enforcement. We go out without law enforcement and we usually end up calling them. because we need their help, and they are the designated transporters of people when they have a mental health commitment. We operate the only inpatient public Baker Act receiving facility in Polk Highlands and Hardy counties, and the only Baker Act facilities that serve children 10 and under. And yes, we have had a 4-year-old that has been in our inpatient facility. So what's the Baker Act? It's the mental health commitment laws in the state of Florida. So somebody actually you turn that noun, the Baker Act, into being Baker Acted, or it's a mental health commitment. So we do offer a large number of services for kids. We work to try to understand to complete the picture and needs of a child and their family, and offer a wide range of services to be able to do that. Now, our therapists are not just in comfy offices, though we do have a lot of them. They actually, and the clients don't necessarily come to us. We actually go into the schools, we go into daycare centers, we go into homes, we go into assisted life care centers, or assisted living facilities. And we see what's going on with the child and their family and what their experience is, and try to work with them to fulfill the needs of the family members. Because you can make a child well again, or better than they were, but if you send them back to a sick home that has ongoing problems, it doesn't make it any better even for a brief period of time. It makes it worse. So what can you do? It takes many services and a community working together to make a difference and address the difficult topics of mental health, substance use, the needs of our children that are affected by adverse childhood experiences, and the needs of our community workforce. The number one workforce disability in the United States and the world, mental health problems. And it isn't absenteeism, it's presenteeism, where people actually do show up to work, they struggle their way in, then they're totally non-productive, and they affect 4 to 5 other people in their immediate vicinity, and it starts to decrease the productivity overall. So what can we do? We can talk about it. The single most important thing we can all do together today is to have the courage to talk about mental health, to understand the issues more, to have conversations with each other and family and friends, and to ask questions and to help make a difference. So there's no doubt, to me, that there is a mental health crisis in the United States. I know I shared a lot of information, probably scared some of you a little bit, but there are 4 things that I would ask that you would take away from you today. One is that there is help and hope for people that are living with mental illness. Because most people with mental illness do lead full, productive, and satisfying lives, and they do go to work, they do vote, they own homes and businesses, they do belong to membership organizations, and they do contribute to our communities in many, many ways. But we don't think about that because we don't think about mental illness. 2, be nice to everyone, because someone might be fighting battles you just don't know about. And that happens for most of us. 3rd, do what makes you happy so you can maintain your mental wellness. Because if you are not mentally well, think about the impact that has on your family, your friends, your neighbors, and your associates throughout the community. And the 4th, it takes compassionate people to have a positive impact. Please keep the conversation going to help people and to make a change. When you leave here today, my challenge to you is that I ask you to make it a point to talk to at least one other person about what we talked about here today. And then I can end and have 2 minutes to spare to ask questions. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
For further reference, can you share what the numbers are for students that have been Baker Acted through this school year?
Sure. At the end of last year, there was 3,600 kids that had been Baker Acted during the year. And to be Baker Acted means that law enforcement arrives on the scene at the school. They go into the building, or it's a school resource officer. They actually do put the child in handcuffs. That's how we know that they've been Baker Acted. They've not been arrested. They have been Baker Acted. They have a mental health commitment order that's in place. They're escorted out of the building, they're put into the back of a police car, they're brought to a Baker Act receiving facility. If it's a child, they're coming to Peace River Center, in our Lakeland facility or our Bartow facility. So this school year, we're probably around 650 to 700 kids. It'll decrease during Thanksgiving, it'll decrease during the week of Christmas because kids are out of school. And what that means is less supervised and less structure, so they pretty much can do what they want to do. And then it will pop back up in January through the end of the school. Any other questions? Oh, sure.
What do you practice or suggest to those who are trying to help someone recognize that they need help? What phrases, things? Thank you.
Sure. So what can you do as an individual if you run across somebody that may be having some sort of a mental health crisis? That show empathy, show compassion, ask them if they're okay. If you fear that somebody may be suicidal, meaning that they want to harm themselves, you probably are thinking if I ask them if they're suicidal that it might cause them to commit suicide. Actually, you just gave them a lifeline. So the best thing you can do is, if you suspect that, is to ask somebody, are you thinking of harming yourself? Are you thinking of taking your life? Because what you've just done when you've done that is you've shown them that you care and that you've given them the opportunity to say, yes, and I need some help. And 9 times out of 10, there's always a chance it doesn't work, but 9 times out of 10, it is very, very successful. And then if you can link them to get access to services, then you can actually make a significant difference. I mean, we do operate the psychiatric crisis hotline for the community. We're responding to over 7,000 calls a year just for that. There is a toll-free number and a published number. I'm not going to say it. I believe it's in some of the materials that you have at your tables. But that's the best way to do it. Anyone else? Going. Thank you very much.